Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. So my mother-in-law pops in today, and she comes up to me and she says, "What about ahadnama for atikasani? Is it permissible to read the ahadnama?" So I'm like, "I don't know what that is, mum." So she shows me her Ozifa, her little dua book, and points me to the dua. So it's got a heading in Bengali called, the heading is ahadnama, and then it's this dua: Allahumma fatir as-samawati wal-ard, عالم الغيب والشهادة إني أعهد إليك في هذه الحياة الدنيا بأني أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن محمدا عبدك ورسولك فإنك إن تكلني إلى نفسي تقربني من الشر وتباعدني من الخير وإني لا أثق إلا برحمتك فاجعله لي عندك عهدا توفيته إلى يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. So yeah, so that's the dua roughly. I'm reading it from where I looked into it, but it means, "Oh Allah, the originator of the heavens and the earth, knower of the unseen and the seen, I pledge to you, or I take a covenant with you in this worldly life, that I testify that there's no God but you alone, you have no partners, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is your slave and messenger, and if you, Lord, leave me to myself, then you will bring me close to evil and distance me from good. So, and I only rely on your mercy. So make it a covenant with you, make it a pledge to you that you will fulfill on the day of judgment. You do not go against your covenants, your promises." So that's basically it. Now, the thing is, and before I tell you what I found about it, so the book that she's reading, it's got this, it's titled Ahadnama. Then it straight after the dua, there's no translation, so she doesn't actually know what she's reading. She's just reading it ritualistically in Arabic. And then there's a hadith mentioned afterwards with no reference, a hadith of Jabir radiyallahu anhu, something about there's 3,000 illnesses in the human body, so many of them have no cure with human medicine, and then there's so many that do have a cure. And then it wasn't clear where the supposed hadith ended, and then there was a couple of lines that said anybody who reads the ahadnama, which I'm pretty sure isn't in the hadith, because ahadnama isn't Arabic, right? It's half Arabic, half Persian. So yeah, whoever reads the ahadnama will be protected from these unknown illnesses, right? Yeah, that's basically it. No reference to the hadith. So initially I looked up that hadith about the 3,000 illnesses and I can't find anything. It's not anything I've come across so far. I'm not gonna say that it's fabricated or anything, because I haven't found anything. But anyway, so there's that. But it was clear that that bit about this dua having something to do with curing illnesses, that's got nothing to do with the illnesses. That was clear. That's from the author. The author's basically just put that in. Anyway, so I told my mother-in-law, "Look, I don't know what it is, but I'll look into it." She said, "Yeah, please do." Because the women in the mosque have been telling me, don't read it because it's not in the Quran, and you shouldn't read something that's not in the Quran. And then she says, people have been asking on the live TV Q&A shows, the Bengali ones, and the Shaykh said, what did he say? He said, "I don't know the dua, I haven't come across it, but you shouldn't read du'as that aren't in the Quran or in the Sunnah." Right? So principally what he said is fine. But obviously he didn't know the dua, so he really hasn't answered now that he hasn't really answered one way or the other. So I looked it up. It turns out that this dua is authentically narrated from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu as something he taught. And the story goes that the narration says that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu read this verse in the Quran. إلا من اتخذ, it's part of a verse, إلا من اتخذ عند الرحمن عهدا, that you know, so if I explain it contextually, so the criminals, or those who commit the sinful people, will be led to Jahannam on that day, and they will have no intercession unless they have a covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the All Merciful. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu read that verse, and he said, make a covenant with the All Merciful Lord, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment will bring to attention, he will call out to the people who have a covenant with him, right? So his student said to him, teach us, O Abu Abdurrahman. That's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's patronym. O Abu Abdurrahman, teach us. So he said, okay, say, and then he taught that dua. Anyway, so that's one. So the hadith is authentically transmitted as something that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu taught to his students, and he himself read. There's another narration narrated. So that narration is it's in, at least it's in many collections, but one collection that I can tell you is in Al-Hakim. It's in Imam Hakim's Mustadrak. Imam Ahmad in his Musnad narrates the same dua, but this time from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam via Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So it's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, but this time he's saying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught it. But this narration has a weakness in it. It's da'if, it's weak. However, obviously there is room to say that in this particular case, you know, because most of the wordings of the dua are acceptable, then the weak. Because most of these du'as exist in other authentic du'as. Most of the words exist in other authentic du'as. So you can say that the words are established authentically, but not put together in this way, and therefore, you know, a weak hadith is still sufficient as virtue. So that's an argument, a position. Of course, people who don't accept weak hadith in virtue would say, no, you don't. But however, they would say that the wording in this dua is acceptable. Anyway, so what do we do? So let's go with the common denominator. The common denominator is that it is authentically narrated from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and therefore it would be permissible to do, not believing that it is a sunnah. So say somebody reads the translation. I don't know, my mother-in-law didn't know the translation, so in her case, I suppose I just had to make sure that she reads it not thinking it's a sunnah, and I explained that to her. But yeah, if a person read the translation and really liked it and thought, yeah, I'd like to read this every day, and they just read it for themselves as though these words were their own, then it's fine, right? It's permissible. Right, so the reason why I told you the story is because there's a few things to bear in mind here. Number one, yeah, elders who read these dua books that are published in Bangladesh, if you can, keep an eye on them, find out what they are, you know, check them, look them up. They probably won't change their minds, but you know, but if you can convince them, then give them, I don't know, another dua book that's authentic. I don't know, perhaps Hisnul Muslim, or what's the other one by Mullah al-Hizb al-A'zam, or something like that. At least those things are compiled by reputable scholars. And some of these ones published in Bangladesh are, nobody knows who these people are. Nobody knows who the authors are. There's no reference to any of the hadith, nothing. So that's one thing. The second thing to learn is, if you're one of those women in the masjid and somebody comes up to you and says, oh, men, sorry, it's not a gender specific issue, but somebody comes up to you and says, oh, you know, what do you think of this dua? You know, is it okay to read it? and you've not heard of it, you've not heard the dua, you have absolutely no right to turn around and say, don't read it, it's not in the Quran. Who made you the mufti? You have no right to say it. It's that, to say something like that is just as ignorant as what you perceive of the person, that they're reading something from, you know, from a dua book that you've not heard of, and they're reading a dua that you've not heard of. What you've just done is just as ignorant as what you think they're doing. So don't become a mufti, because you're not. You don't know. Just say you don't know. I don't know, auntie. I don't know, uncle. Please go and ask a scholar. Why are you becoming a mufti for? It's a really, really bad habit. Okay? And it's a sin. It goes against the command of Allah. لا تقف ما ليس لك به علم. Don't pursue things that you have no knowledge of. Right? Don't answer without knowledge. If you don't know, you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. You can't answer as though you know. Right? So, yeah, so that's the other thing to bear in mind, right? It's a really, really bad habit, and people shouldn't do that. Because what needs to be done is, you don't know, that person doesn't know. What needs to be done, it needs to be checked. It needs to be checked, because chances are somebody's published it in a book. They may have made errors, but there is also just as much of a chance that that they got it from somewhere and this is actually authentic, but they just haven't, then they weren't particularly competent and they haven't referenced it properly, and therefore it's becoming difficult to find the source, and it's not well known. But just because it's not well known doesn't mean, A, it doesn't mean it's not authentic, it's not in the sunnah, and B, it doesn't mean it's not permissible to use, it's not permissible to read. Yeah, so keep that in mind, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah, I probably should do this in Bengali, shouldn't I? Maybe I will. Anyway, thought I'd share that with you. Assalamu alaikum.